Hi, I'm Will Bruin, and I was just recognized as a Seattle Sounders legend. Now I get to do voice reads for the Sounder at Heart podcast network.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Rui Diaz through the middle to crown it for Seattle!
The Sounders rule the region!
Seattle Sounders is campeón!
All creatures great and small! ¡De la Vega! ¡No me pongo de pie! ¡De rodillas!
You know, what was the thought process in terms of who you decided to use and who you didn't?
Ever since Sounder at Heart wrote a commentary that we didn't take Gold Cup seriously.
This episode of Nos Arietes is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Arietes since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest. Welcome to another episode of Nos Arietes, part of the Sounder at Heart podcast network. Sponsored by Full Pool Wines, Hacks and Ferments, and our subscribers. We're recording on Wednesday, October 8th. I am your host, Jeremiah O'Shan. Today, I am again joined by my co-host, Aaron Campo, and our engineer, Lickett. Well, welcome back, Aaron. We're going to be doing a mailbag today in the second half, but before that, what did you think of the Timbers game? You got to sit in the stands.
Yeah, a lot of fun. I was in the Bromend in upper 122, which was cool. Haven't been down there in a bit. And yeah, it was a good time. All those games are nightmare slogs that are exactly like that. So I wasn't too privy to the discourse around the game, but I feel like anytime you can win in the Portland rivalry, you're doing okay. And, you know, first one since 2017, right? So how can you be upset about that?
Yeah, that streak was unbelievable, frankly. It was hard to wrap my mind around, and it feels like a significant burden was lifted that we just don't have to talk about that streak anymore, because it does start to be one of those things where it takes on a life of itself. And I think back to a couple years ago when they were up 2-0 at halftime, and it seemed like they were just rolling to the victory, and then Leo Chu gets sent off, and all of a sudden they have to settle for a 2-2 tie. Then last year they took a 1-0 lead, but then they seem to be dominating the game, and then Obed Vargas gets sent off for like the dumbest red card I've ever seen, frankly.
Yeah.
And this year they score relatively early, and you're thinking maybe this is the easy one, and it just never was. They made it as interesting as they possibly could. I think they were the better team, really, from beginning to end. There was maybe a brief stretch there where they had to hold on a little bit, but I think they were the better team. But they had multiple opportunities to put the game away, and they just refused to do it.
They did, yeah. And I mean, to their credit, Portland's a good defensive team. Feels crazy to say that, but it is true. And they made the Sounders work for it, but they did have opportunities that I would have loved to see them take advantage of. It never did really feel like Portland was too threatening. And maybe there were chances that just didn't seem threatening from where I was sitting. I don't know. That's always the thing with sitting in the stands is you don't have a great sense sometimes of what's actually happening. But to me, it didn't really feel like they had a ton of great chances. So it didn't feel comfortable necessarily, but it also definitely felt like the Sounders were in control, and it felt a lot more likely that they were going to score a second than the Timbers were going to score a first. So, that's always you love it to be the easy one, like you said. You'd love
Right.
to see the Sounders stomp the Timbers into mud. But it's very rare that it happens. I think in the history at the MLS level, the Sounders have won at home by more than one goal, like once, I think.
Once or twice. Yeah. It's not a common occurrence. I feel like they only have won by 3 goals once.
Yeah.
And that was like the year that I think that was 2012 when the Timbers
Gavin was the coach, right?
No, it was after he had been fired. They were so bad. That was like Gavin was the coach. You're right. Yeah. Gavin was the coach because he had replaced whoever the first coach was. And
John Spencer, right? That was his name.
Oh yeah, John Spencer. Yeah, good. And yeah, that was the only year that I think they've won by 3 goals at home. Then they've won by 3 goals a couple times in Portland for whatever, somehow, but they've scored a bunch of goals in Portland. They scored a lot more goals in Portland, I believe, than they've scored in Seattle in the history of the rivalry, which is crazy to think about. But yeah, this was a game where the Sounders, like I said, they looked like the better team. The XG on this game was about, the Sounders basically doubled Portland's XG. 1.2 to 0.6 roughly is how it came out, depending on where you look. But like the 2 biggest chances, I thought, or maybe even 3 biggest chances that they had to add a goal, they didn't even get a shot off. And unfortunately, Danny Musovski was in the middle of a lot of those. The most egregious was a ball in the 75th minute or so, where Christian Roldan plays it in, and Musovski does this really impressive job of sort of shielding his defender and then turning, and he seems to be looking right at Paul Rothrock, who has nothing but space in front of him inside the box. But instead of just laying it off, he decides to take a touch. It's a horrible touch, and he loses the ball. And then late in the game, after the Sounders have gone down a man, which they seem to just love doing, and especially against the Timbers, which we'll talk about that a little bit too. But they go down a man, and Danny Leyva plays this gorgeous ball into Musovski. He breaks in on goal, and he just takes forever to shoot, and Diego Chara comes in from behind and makes this amazing tackle. Just kind of a and then the Sounders, as it turned out, they didn't really have to withstand too much pressure when they were down a man. They only had to play for a minute or 2 down a man. But the funniest thing was Phil Neville absolutely losing his mind after the final whistle. Apparently, he wanted 4 minutes of stoppage time, which 4 additional minutes of stoppage time, I should say. I will just note that when Albert Rusnak gets the red card, it's the 94th minute. That means they have about a minute left to play. And it took 2.5 minutes or whatever to review it. And they ended up adding on about a minute and a half to the end of the game. They got plenty of time. There was no question that they got
they did.
Time.
And they had not had, they had 1 shot after the 85th minute. It's not like they were busting down the door. I think, in fact, the Sounders had the best chance after Rusnak got sent off to score, if I remember.
Well, that was
correctly.
The Musovski, yeah. That was easily the best chance.
Yeah, so very funny, but also very on brand for Phil Neville to behave that way, I think. They just... Gio Savarese was, I thought, a generally, pretty likable or at least neutral guy, but every other coach they have had has been so easy to despise. So it's nice of them, to commit to the bit.
It is.
But yeah, I think that it's just really hard for me to take anything away from this game other than, man, I'm really glad that we finally won this in this thing at home. Obviously, I would like to see the Sounders get back to scoring 3 goals a game. We haven't seen them be that dangerous in a little while, and if they're gonna get through the playoffs, that's what they're gonna have to do it that way, I think.
It does seem that way, yeah.
And so obviously that would have been great, if they had been able to do that. But this rivalry just isn't the place where that's likely to happen necessarily. We're either it's gonna be a shootout, or more frequently it's going to be a game like this one where it's low scoring, intense, and defensive, and nobody wanting to make a mistake. So, yeah, it was not the most exciting game on the merits of it, but the end result, I think, justified how much of a slog it kind of felt like at times.
Yeah, I would say if there's a thing to take away from it, and I don't know how much I would take away from it, is this and the Whitecaps game to me had the energy of a playoff game, and so in the sense that I think we've seen the sound like up the first 3 games after the League's Cup break, I think there was some intensity deficit that they had to make up. And in these last 2 games, I think they showed that they can still do that. I think, like the most encouraging thing may have been that Christian Roldan looked great. Like I think there were starting to be some questions as to whether or not he just has emptied the tank and is sort of running on fumes at this point. And I think the Portland game showed like, no, he's perfectly capable of still being an elite defensive midfielder. And, he's never going to be Ozzy Alonso in his defensive play, but he does so much else that sort of he can make up for it in other ways. And he had a couple great passes in this game. Jesus Ferreira, I thought, looked really good. There were bright spots in individual performances, I thought. If there's a concern I have coming out of it, though, it is like what you said. It's that the offense doesn't seem to be quite clicking the way that it was. Jordan, they struggled to get Jordan the ball in dangerous areas. I wish Jordan had been able to get some of the chances that Musovski got, but Musovski, to his credit, this is what he does. He seems to always find himself in dangerous areas. And so it's like maybe Jordan wouldn't have, maybe we're not giving enough credit to Musovski to putting himself in positions to be in, dangerous scoring opportunities. And, sometimes he doesn't score them all, but that's the trade-off, I guess.
Yeah, I do think that this was a performance with Musovski where you understand why Jordan is first choice when he's healthy, even with the goal scoring numbers Danny has put up, because the Rothrock chance is a great example of just like Jordan is he's not going to be selfish there. He's making that pass.
Right.
And Danny either doesn't see it or doesn't feel confident in his ability to pull off that pass or whatever it is. But he is exceptionally good at finding those dangerous spots, and he's not going to finish them every time, but he finishes about as often as you would expect him to. Fortunately, he didn't finish one of them, in this game, which would have made the end of it a little bit easier to deal with. But I definitely, after Jordan left the game, even though he wasn't getting a ton of chances, he wasn't super duper involved. You could just kind of see the impact he had that to the non-goal scoring aspects of the game that Danny just doesn't bring.
Yeah, the other downside for this game was that they lost a couple players. Albert Rusnak is out for this week. That's a big, and both of them are pretty big losses because they are short in both the defensive midfield and in defense against RSL. And then they also lost Kim Ki-hee at halftime to a calf strain. Unclear still how serious that is, but he's not going to be playing against RSL. Let's talk a little bit though about the Rusnak challenge. I have I'm of two minds on it. On one, I appreciate the hustle. He had gone down the field challenging for the ball. I think maybe not his place to do it though. He probably should have hung back. Georgie Manungu was also up there. That put the Sounders at a numbers disadvantage. And I think Albert knew that, which is why he's running to get back. And then he makes a tackle that he just doesn't really have to make. If he does not go into that tackle, nothing bad is probably going to happen. Like, I appreciate the mindset of wanting to break it up. I appreciate him wanting to win that ball back, but it's a tackle from behind. He does not execute it very well, and it's a deserved red card. And so on one hand, I'm annoyed with him for making some mistakes on it, but on the other, at least I kind of appreciate the effort. And he, according to Schmetzer, this was his highest physical output game of the season, which kind of makes sense. He was playing as an 8 as opposed to a 10, so there was more opportunity. But it does show that he sort of stepped up, and maybe his highest physical output ever. But yeah, it was. So in that way, it's like, I don't want to beat up on him too badly, but it was a really dumb challenge.
It was. There wasn't any need for it. It was definitely, now obviously Albert Rusnak is not a forward, but that is the kind of challenge you would call a forward challenge, right? There's obviously no intent, but it's just clumsy. It's just a really bad challenge to make. And I just feel like he's a guy that needs to know better than to make that challenge in that situation. And on the one hand, neither of the games left in the regular season matter all that much. The Sounders are almost certainly going to finish fifth. I just, whatever. He gets a week off. Not the end of the world, but at the same time, I don't think you want to go into the playoffs on a down note. Like, it'd be really nice if you could go into the playoffs winning your last 3 games and feeling and it's gonna, and especially because they've been so good at home this year, and they're probably only going to get one more home game in the playoffs. Like, going in and feeling like you can make the most out of that game is, now. The other side of the coin is that the Sounders are going to be very well aware of how shorthanded they are against RSL. And so it's probably not going to destroy their confidence if they don't get a win in that game. But still, you'd much, much rather get the win, go into the playoffs on a high note. Obviously, they still have the one road game left, but still, it'd be really nice to end the regular season on a win at home. So,
yes.
Yeah. Interestingly, they don't have any way, I don't believe, of catching last year's point total. Which
correct.
Is what I was,
they had 50 because they had 55 points last year, 56 points last year.
Yeah. And I was going to say it'd be nice if they could match that.
They could pass that if they won their last two. Aren't they on 49?
They're on 49. They had, what did they have last year? They had
57. Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like
57 last year. Sorry.
Oh, they had 57 last year. Oh,
yeah.
So they're gonna definitely fall short.
Yeah, and it would be nice to match that total, I think. But there's a question about this in the question section, so I won't get too deep into it. Get into that. But it is interesting that the narrative of the two seasons, how different they've been, and the reality is that last season, the regular season at least was better, but.
It does, yeah. It's interesting the way it's played out. I would agree with that. I mean, I feel like this season has felt more successful than maybe the numbers suggest, mainly because of the League's Cup run, which was a legitimate, a legitimate highlight. Even if we don't think the League's Cup is the biggest deal, those were games that they played that were a lot of fun and. Brought a lot of positive emotion, I think, to everything.
Yep.
LAFC, by the way, is beating Toronto, is going to win today, and they will officially jump into third place. So as of now, the Sounders are likely going to be playing Minnesota United. I would say it's almost definite that they're going to play Minnesota United in the first round. So,
yeah. Seems to be the way it's trending for sure. Yeah, which, well, we have a question on that too, so I won't.
So we won't.
We'll go into
so
that.
Maybe we should just, maybe that's a good place maybe to call this a segment. We'll come back. We have a lot of questions from you. Not a lot. I'm sorry. We have some questions from you, and we'll do that. All right. You're listening to No Sadietas. Thank you for listening to the Sounder at Heart podcast network, which now includes No Sadietas, Lobbing Scorchers, and the Cooler Guild. Although this podcast is free, it's only made possible through our paid subscribers. Plans start as low as $30 a year and allow us to remain independent and mostly ad-free. Subscribers get access to all our written and podcast content, including a full-text RSS feed and a mostly ad-free podcast feed that includes every show in one spot. If you really like what we're doing, though, I'd encourage you to sign up at our higher tiers members, which include all sorts of various perks. The most popular of those is our members-only Discord, where the real Sounders sickos hang out. I know I've called this group the smartest, funniest, and best-informed Sounders fans in the world, but it's more than the rough equivalent of a Sounders Mensa meeting. Discord is where we make things happen, like for real. You know the promotion the Sounders ran that offered fans the opportunity to trade in their Messi jersey for a Paul Rothrock one? That originated in our community. You'll not only be the first to know about stuff, but you also have a semi-direct line to the movers and shakers at the Sounders organization. If you want to be one of the totally normal people who occupy the Sounder at Heart Discord, just become a supporter of Sounder at Heart. Anyway, thanks for listening, and go Durs. Nos Audietes, admittedly, is not exactly known for our spicy takes, but that doesn't mean we want our food to be mild. Spice up your life with Hacks and Ferments. Handcrafted in Georgetown and made with the best local ingredients from across the Pacific Northwest, they specialize in unique small batch fermented hot sauces and vinegars. Hacks and Ferments brings bold flavors and natural fermentation together for something truly special. Whether you're a heat seeker or just looking to elevate your cooking, you'll find something you love at hacksandferments.com. That's HAXANFERMENTS.com. And right now, if you use the code SOUNDERATHEART, that's all one word, at checkout, you will get a free hot sauce with your order. Again, go to hacksandferments.com, use the code SOUNDERATHEART at checkout for a free hot sauce with your order. Hacks and Ferments is a proud sponsor of the Sounder at Heart podcast network. Welcome back to Nos Audietes. So we're doing our September mailbag in October. We're running a little behind on these things, but
I say we just say that this is October. At some point in the past, we missed a month, and we're sorry. But going forward,
good call. Yeah. So the next time we'll do one of these.
We're doing a
We're
good
just gonna
job
say
now.
the next one we're gonna do is in November. We'll just call it like that. Maybe early November, probably. And I'll just remind everyone, we take these questions from our Discord. The Discord is where all the cool Sounder at Heart people hang out. If you'd like to get into the Discord, it's pretty easy. All you got to do is become a supporter or above, and then send us an email, and we'll get you added. It is a manual process. I know a lot of people are caught off guard by that. Nothing is automated about this, unfortunately. But upgrade your membership, send us an email, we'll confirm it, and then we'll send you an invite, and bada bing, bada boom, all of a sudden you are one of the coolest people in the whole of Sounders land. So there you go. All right, Aaron, do we want to just jump into this?
Let's jump in. First one is from Ken W. Everyone is healthy enough to start, and we know this is a hypothetical, if that's the way you're starting off. Who is your ideal starting 11 versus Minnesota United or LAFC? But as we discussed, probably Minnesota United.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't really. I didn't actually. This is a good phrasing of it, because so my best 11, independent of who the Sounders are facing. If I want to put out the Sounders' best group, I think it's probably Fry is my goalkeeper, even though I'm not. Yeah, I'll go with Fry. Nuhu, Reagan, Yamar, Alex Roldan, Obed, and Christian, and then Pedro, Rusnak, and Ferreira and Morris. I think there is some. My suspicion is that the areas for debate will be Ferreira versus Rothrock, which I think is a perfectly legit debate, or maybe Ferreira versus De La Vega. I don't know. And then Reed Baker Whiting maybe for Nuhu, and Thomas for Fry. Where do you fall though? How does this differ from you?
I think I'm with you, except I would start Reed over Nuhu, I think. But I think otherwise we're in agreement. I think you can make a case for Thomas. I might be, especially in the playoffs where penalties
There's
might be a
possibility,
a factor, but that just doesn't even seem to be remotely in the realm of possibility to me. So the tiebreaker in this case would be reality, I suppose. So but I think and I think some people would make a case for Rothrock as well. and I think that's fair enough. But for me, it's Jesus and Pedro for sure are the better options.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know that we've seen maybe one game with that lineup. I'm not sure we've actually seen any games with that lineup, which is, I guess I could look right now to I have this somewhere. But yeah, I don't think we've seen it. Cuz we came close to seeing it against Portland, but of course both Yamar and Vargas were out. And then yeah, I don't think we've seen this lineup at all.
Yeah.
We have not.
Yeah, which says a lot, I think.
It does. Would you be at all tempted, though, to play a different formation, especially in Minnesota? Or do you think that's just overthinking it and you play your best group, and then if you have to change it up later on, you change it up later on?
I think in the first game you go in and play your best group. And I think the bigger question for me is, what do the Sounders in playoff mode look like versus what the Sounders have looked like for most of the season? Is it the same approach, as we've kind of gotten used to seeing, which is a lot more attacking, I think, than they have been in the past? Or do we see vintage Brian Schmetzer playoffs soccer? And so that'll be really interesting to see. But I think you go into the first game and do whatever you feel like you need to do, or whatever you want to do in a perfect world, right? You don't overthink it in the first game, and then you use that first game to inform what you do in the next away game, if there is one, So that's how I'd approach it. I think that you want to try to. You don't want the opposition to dictate too much, I think, if you can avoid it, unless they are clearly a much, much better team.
Right.
So the formation, I wouldn't change too much, but I do think you have to be aware of what Minnesota is going to try to do and try to counteract that tactically to some extent. You can't be naive and just feel like you're going to be able to fully, enforce your will onto the game. We have enough experience playing this Minnesota team to know what they do. And a lot of what we've done in the past has not worked to counteract it. So I do think you have to make some adjustments, but I wouldn't change things wholesale,
Yeah, I think if you get late in the game and you're looking for a goal, I could see maybe putting Musovski up top with Morris, or even De Rosario and Musovski, like depending on how that goes, and maybe you rolled Rusnak back a line. I suppose maybe you take off Obed in that situation. I don't actually know. That's what makes it tough. Is that okay? You can drop Albert back a line, but then does that really make you better if you're taking off Obed? Like, I don't know if it does.
Yeah. I don't think it does. I mean, I think Obed has been one of the most consistent players on the team. And you're doing that because I would assume either to get Musovski into the game or to play Pedro or Ferreira at the 10, and then get Rothrock into the game would be my guess. And I don't know that Musovski or Rothrock are enough to justify sitting Obed, I would say.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with you there. All right. This is from Veritatum 7. I think that's right. Nobody wants to face LAFC attacking tandem in the best of 3 round, which makes sense. But are there any good arguments for wanting them in the first round where we at least get a home match? And selfishly, I want to see Sun rather than in the later rounds.
Nope. Not as far as I'm concerned. They're the best team in the West and arguably, I think, in MLS right now. Yeah, I think you want to play them as few minutes as possible.
I would agree with you there. And and I think there was some reason to be like, to the degree that there was doubt about them, it was mainly that they were so reliant seemingly on Sun and Bouanga during this 8-game stretch or whatever. They've just been going crazy. Well, granted, it's against Toronto FC, but it's against a Toronto FC that's been playing better. They were missing both of those players tonight. And LAFC won 2-0, which is understating how dominant they were. They had 3.09 expected goals to Toronto's 0.6. This is a dominant performance. And that should, I think that's going to do a lot to quiet any concerns that this team is maybe overly reliant on maybe the two most dynamic attackers in the league.
Yeah, which is bad news because those guys are probably
for sure, for everyone.
Yeah, those guys are probably going to deliver. So it sucks that on the off chance that they don't, they're still good. That's a problem.
Yeah.
All right, next one is from Derek R. We are going to have to play most of the playoffs on the road. How are you feeling about the team's ability to win those road games? They've gone 4 wins, 4 draws, and 8 losses in 16 road games, and their 1 even points per game on the road is tied for 9th in the West and 19th overall. The only playoff team with the worst road record is RSL or Colorado if they take the spot. There are 3 things that give me some hope. We are better than our road record suggests. We have the 3rd best road XGD per 90 in the league and are one of only 6 teams with a positive road XGD. We are noticeably underperforming our XG for and against on the road, 18 goals scored versus 23.8 XG and 27 goals allowed versus 21.7 XG. We have averaged 4.2 lineup changes per road game this year compared to 3.1 per home game. With no fixture congestion during the playoffs, there should be a more consistent lineup. Thank you, Derek R., for including all of that detail. That's
because that kind of, I think to the degree that question that he kind of answered his own question there, which I appreciate.
I think so. Yeah.
And I don't know that I have a lot to add other than I think there is reason to be, if the Sounders had a bunch of home games, I'd feel a lot better about their chances. But like Derek R. illustrates, it's not like they're so bad away from home. Their record isn't good, but they've actually been pretty competitive on the road. And, there's a few results in there that you can say they should have had better results in. And, the Austin one being a good example. The Minnesota game was another good example. The Atlanta game was another good example. You can kind of go down the list, and you could have found probably 3 or 4 wins, and you add 3 or 4 wins to their total, and all of a sudden it doesn't look so bad. But yeah, I'd feel a lot better if they finished higher in the table and had more home games. But it doesn't look like their only home game most likely will be the first round game that they host.
Yeah. Barring some kind of miracle somewhere else, maybe Portland knocks off LAFC or something, or I guess they play San Diego. Probably not.
Yeah. Well, who knows? All right, I'm going to jump ahead because I have a feeling you probably don't want to answer these ones. Spaceman Spliff, with our DP spots all filled for the foreseeable future, how and when do we expect to see the Sounders spend the bags of cash they earn from Leagues Cup and the Club World Cup to improve their team?
I don't know. They could sign a U22. I think they probably will. They seemed like they got pretty close over the summer and just couldn't land it. But I think, they'll probably do that. They might pay a transfer fee for Obed's replacement, maybe. They might pay transfer fees for Defiance, which I think they can use that prize money for.
Certainly that's money that they're allowed to use to spend on the Defiance for sure. And they might do that. I've actually talked to some people in the talent acquisition department who think that that's one area that they could, if they're trying to alter sort of the paradigm, so to speak, of their system, it's why don't we spend some money and bring someone into Defiance and, take some higher upside chances there.
Right. Yeah. So that's an option. Maybe they, spend some of it on the academy. There's all sorts of stuff they can do to spend that money. And maybe they put it in a high yield savings account until they're ready to buy a DP, right? Like I don't think there's necessarily a time frame on when these dollars have to be spent.
No, there's definitely not.
Yeah, and they do, like the GAM that they have to buy from the league. Like they get the GAM cap space, but they have to spend real dollars on all their salaries. So yeah, there's tons of stuff that they can and probably already are spending on. But I think when people ask this question, they're talking about transfer fees.
They are, and I think that's reasonable.
For sure.
I guess the thing I will always say is there are 2 things can be true. One is that I too want a shiny player to get excited about, but I do think we also have to be realistic in that we have to look at the players the Sounders have who are designated players, and I realize Jordan has not been healthy, so maybe that's not the best example. But, Pedro de la Vega, I feel like has given me enough this year, if not to be like, I'm not saying that's the most, the best use of a DP spot, but when he is playing, he plays like a DP. He is producing. He has been producing for a few months now, like a DP. He scored a great goal in the Timbers game, which we didn't even talk about, which is kind of funny. But he, so and then Albert Rusnak to me is as productive. Like, you just can't ask for more from a DP than what Albert Rusnak is giving in terms of like, this is what you expect from a DP. And so I'm not really itching to get rid of any of the Sounders DPs to make room for one, which I realize Spliff is not arguing for here. I'm just saying in general, I'm just not that. I guess what I'm saying is I'm okay right now with their DP situation. Come back and check in with me in a year from now, if I still feel, or even 6 months from now. But right now I feel okay with it. And there are other ways I can spend the money.
Yeah, for sure. And I expect them to. Like, I know people are tired of hearing that, but I do think I am a lot more convinced now than I was this time last year that they do actually want to actively spend money on a U22. Like, I really do think that they do. I just think that those deals are tough because they have their constraints that they put on themselves organizationally that makes them tough to get over the line. But I do think they will do that probably pretty soon. Next one is from Andrew. Assuming that JP and Obed are both gone by next summer at the latest, what is the plan for Christian's partner? Internal promotion, position switch, MLS free agent, signing from outside the league?
So I think my hope is there are two really good candidates on the roster right now to me to pair with Christian. One of them is Snyder Brunell, who I think is going to get plenty of minutes next year. And I realize that Danny Leyva has sort of graduated to more of a backup 10, but I don't see any reason that he can't, like, next year. I don't see any reason why they wouldn't drop him back and give him a chance to be the starter next to Christian Roldan, assuming Obed has left. I like that option. I think I like that option better than a lot of external options that they would potentially have. I think that Leyva is a good candidate to partner with Christian because Christian's going to do a lot of the dirty work that Leyva doesn't necessarily need to do. And I think, he's potentially a really good partner for Christian. We have not seen them play together almost at all. So I would be interested in seeing that. I'd actually be kind of bummed if they go out and sign sort of like a MLS journeyman to sort of take those minutes. Now, if they go out and sign like a TAM level player to partner with Christian, great. But I kind of, and I suppose maybe that's one area. Like, they don't have a whole lot of spots on the roster that they need to spend on. So maybe that would be a good one to spend on. But I think that would be, I think it's reasonable to think they have some internal options, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I really like Danny, and my preference would be they go into the season with him as the presumed starter, and if he's not delivering, you've got the summer transfer window to make something happen. But I would like to see, I think he's done a lot to earn playing time this year. I have a much different opinion on his future prospects now than I did coming into the season. He's really impressed me when he's had minutes this year. And he's just got really good players ahead of him on the depth chart, I think there's a chance Snyder Brunell could make a push as well. He's been good. He's been really good as well. Maybe they could do a platoon kind of thing there. And then, give yourself the option in the summer to improve that spot if you're not getting what you need. But I love the idea of having another homegrown in that spot. And I'm going to make a suggestion now. We've got 3 Defiance questions. You just want to do those. I'll ask them for you rapid fire and then get to our last question.
Yeah.
All right. So the first one is from our friend Dave. Who would you like to see as the next coach of Defiance?
Mike Morris is the guy who took over for Hervé DSA at midseason. He didn't end up getting to coach a whole bunch of games because he was part of the U20, the USA U20 coaching staff. So he went to the World Cup and as a result, Wade Weber ended up coaching most of the last few games of the season. But I think Mike Morris is a great candidate. He's been with the club for a really long time. He's done all the work that, he was a candidate for the last time they had this opening. I think he's a great candidate. I would, I think he's pretty easy hire to me. Who knows? I thought he would get hired. Honestly, I thought he was going to get hired last time. I thought DSA was an interesting hire. I liked him. It didn't work out, obviously, but I don't think that means it was a bad hire necessarily. But yeah, no. I hope it's Mike Morris.
Nice. All right. Next one's from Derek R. We've signed quite a few players from the Defiance to the first team over the past couple of years. Have we bled them dry, or can we expect them to keep getting solid contributors that aren't from our academy, like KKR, Darrow, and Georgie?
So I don't know how many players we can expect that are not from the academy, but I do think, Sebastian Gomez came from the academy. I think he is going to get a long look at a first team roster spot. Yusu Kanome is not from the academy. He's maybe the best candidate for the type of player that Derek is talking about. You just set the Defiance record for goals in both an MLS Next Pro season and overall. He scored 21 goals. He had 5 assists. Really an amazing season. It's an organization-wide record for goals in a season. It tops the 19 that Obafemi Martins had in 2014. That said, I don't know exactly how he's going to translate to MLS. He is sort of like a Dempsey-esque type of midfielder forward. He's not necessarily a 9. He's not really a 10. Maybe like a Freddie Montero type where he sits beneath the striker. This is his first really productive season. This is actually only his second professional season at 24 years old. So he's a little bit of a late bloomer, but he's an interesting player. He can play out on the wing. He definitely has a knack around goal. He's got good vision. I don't know how he translates to MLS, but I think you have a season like he had and you almost have to sign him, because it's like, if you have a season like that and the team doesn't sign you, what is that? What kind of message is that sending? So I feel like he's probably going to get a shot. And then other players who might get a call. Peter Kingston is someone that I know the Sounders have liked, that people in the organization like. He is technically a former academy player. His path to Defiance is a little bit more circuitous. He played for both UW and Seattle U. He played for Ballard FC for a bunch of years. And he's also playing his first professional season, I think, at 23. So a little different path. I like him, though. I think he has some potential. He plays a few different positions. But those are probably the 3 players who I think have that are most likely to jump to the Sounders. But yeah, the Sounders did kind of bleed the team dry a little bit in the last couple years.
Yeah, but hey, you know what? I'm not complaining about that. That's what they're for, right? Last Defiance question from ATNSG 2000: Do Defiance or Academy players lift, do rehab, eat, etc. with the first team, or is there more separation inside the facility? Motivated by news that Man United evicted a few youth teams from the current facility and claimed it was an earn your spot move.
So my understanding is that they have kind of created a earn your spot type of environment at Long Acres. There are definitely separate facilities for the first team and for the academy and Defiance. They actually train on different fields than the Sounders train on. They don't train on, I don't know if they ever actually train on the grass fields. I think they train almost exclusively on the 2 turf fields that are on the outskirts of the training area. They have their own weight room, which is nice, but not nearly as nice as the Sounders weight room. They have their own physio space, which is nice, but again, not as nice as the Sounders physio space. They have lockers, which are nice, but there's a theme here, not quite as nice as the Sounders. Right. So there is sort of this idea of, even though you're in the same building, even though you will train with the first team from now and then, you are definitely not a first team player at this time. You're not being treated like a first team player. I assume the meals are probably the same, but they have definitely, that was something that they at least said that they were very purposeful about. Maybe it was, maybe that's a little convenient. They probably saved a lot of money by not having them the same quality of facilities. But they definitely wanted to keep them separated. I know that there were some concerns about having a whole bunch of kids mixing with a whole bunch of adults. And so there was some purposefulness there. And yeah, it is kind of an earn your stripes type of situation. So that I guess in that sense, it's good. Maybe it depends on your perspective. I've definitely heard some people express some frustration over this, that they feel like the academy players to be elevated more. But I think it makes sense to me.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I definitely think there's probably some value in having like more active role modeling from the senior players, but I think it's got to be a balance, right? And I'm sure there are opportunities for that.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, we're going to close it out with a question from Josh. He says, aside from 2022's finish, for obvious reasons, the Sounders have never closed the season below 7th in the Supporters' Shield, and with Smetcher never below 4th in the West and usually 2nd. This year, they'll probably finish right around where they are right now, 14th and 5th in the West, 14th overall and 5th in the West. The Sounders used to be the bar against which other teams are measured themselves, and in many ways, they still are. And yet they are languishing in mid-table. How do you process the state of affairs in a year in which they've lost just one game at home, won a cup final, and are playing exciting attacking soccer?
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting to contrast things with how people felt even at this stage of last season when the Sounders had been playing pretty good soccer and winning a lot of games, but I think the vibes were still pretty rancid, really, until they beat LAFC in the playoffs. People were there was a lot of consternation about the state of the team, and a lot of that I think was the style of play. A lot of it was how bad the first part of the season had been, but ultimately, I do think there's something to the Sounders being more fun to watch this season, scoring more goals. I think people are excited to see that. Pedro coming good has, I think, been a huge part of it. Ferreira, after kind of a slow start, showing himself to be a really, really good player and becoming a key piece has been a big part of it. So that all helps, right? But I think when you look at the injuries they've had this season, and you look at what they have been able to accomplish in spite of that, when Jordan Morris has barely played, they've missed every other key player for notable portions of time, many of them at the same time. And they're going to finish 5th. That's a little disappointing, but they did win the League's Cup. And I think they're better than your typical 5th place team in the Western Conference. I think that 5th, they've earned it. The games at the beginning of the season still count, but I think that they are a lot closer to, a team like, probably not LAFC, but a team like San Diego than a team like Portland, at the end of the day. And so, I mean, this is a team that, even though they have typically finished higher in the table than they are finishing this year, in summary, it is kind of weird that the vibes seem so much better this season than they did last season and in past seasons, given where they are on the table. But I think people understand how difficult it has been with some of the absences they've had, and winning a cup is always going to help smooth things over.
Yeah, I'll just sort of echo a lot of that. It is funny to look back at last season, and they finished the season 5-0-2. They didn't lose any of their last 7 games in the regular season, and then they beat the Dynamo in 2 back-to-back shootouts in the playoffs. And I think maybe what was coloring the dour mood around the team was this sort of inevitable matchup with LAFC that we were all dreading. And last year they had lost 3 times to LAFC, 4 times to LAFC. They'd been eliminated from 2 separate tournaments by LAFC, and they had not beaten them in something like 10 games. And it just felt so like inevitable that they were going to lose again to LAFC. And I think that was, and so basically to remind people of what happened last year is they lost to them in the League's Cup. 2 games later, they lose to them in the Open Cup at home at Starfire, a place where they're supposed to never lose. And then they followed that up by losing on the road to the Timbers. So the mood around the team was just so bad. The fact that they went on a 7-game unbeaten run was almost like secondary because of, and they went into the playoffs like kind of on a high in some ways. But this year, their last 7 games are going to end up being a much worse record than they had last year. But there's this sense of they've shown you already that they can win big games and big moments. And I don't know if they will get past Minnesota. Minnesota's beaten them twice this year, but I'm just not. I'm at this point, I'm not that worried about Minnesota. Maybe they don't get past them, but I feel like they can. And LAFC potentially is 2 rounds away from them. If they get to a conference final against LAFC, I will consider this like a very successful season. And if they can get over 50 points this year, I think I'll be satisfied that as a regular season. It's been a much more fun regular season, like you said, just because of all the goal scoring. They've been really good at home. I don't have a lot of complaints right now.
No, and I think too, last year there was a lot of uncertainty about what the team was going to look like in the future.
Yes, I think that was another thing.
Was still getting minutes, and we didn't know that Jordan was going to be a DP. Pedro looked like he may well be a bust, and I think now they look pretty well set up for the future. Like they definitely have some key guys that are aging, but Jesus Ferreira is young, Pedro de la Vega is young, Jordan Morris still has a couple years left where you expect him to be at this level. Christian Roldan, same deal. Obviously, Obed's not going to be around that much longer. Gaymar is getting up there. It's not like everything is all hunky-dory and they're set up for the next decade, but I think there's a pretty clear sense of like what the team's identity is going to look like going forward, and that they have something they can build on, and that certainly helps as well.
When I think beyond that, I think there's a comfort with the idea that we might know what the identity. The fact that they had such a successful offensive season, I think just raises the baseline expectation, like the baseline excitement around this team. Because I think part of what was so frustrating the last 2 years, really, the 2 previous years, is that for all their success, it felt like there was this hard cap on how good they could be because they were just not very exciting offensively. And so when they lost, it just felt so like it was really like it was hard to have fun unless they were winning. Whereas the Sounders are at least entertaining even when they haven't been winning this year. So I think that changes things a little bit.
For sure.
But, we'll see. All right. Well, that was a great question, Josh. I think we had some really actually good questions. Some people who helped us out a lot with adding a lot of context to their questions and making it more interesting. But just as a reminder, if you want to get your questions answered on our show, get into the Discord. Frankly, every day you get your questions answered on the Discord. It's a lot of fun in there. I hang out there. Aaron hangs out there. Lickett hangs out there. A lot of Sounder at Heart people are in there just hanging out. If you want to get on, I'm just saying, become a supporter and email us and we'll get you all hooked up. It will be a great time. This is a huge part of what we're doing here. The Discord community has become a really important part of the Sounder at Heart independence. And so thank you to their sponsors, Full Pull Wines and Hacks and Ferments. Thank you, of course, to our readers who are supporting us and making this work. I feel like, right now KXP is in the middle of a fund drive. Fund drive? Is that right? Fund drive? And
fundraising
because they lost a pledge drive. Thank you. Because they lost all this, they were getting, I think $1 million a year from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting that just went away. And so they're out there asking people to support them. Great radio station. I support them. I hope everyone here does their part to support them. It's a great resource. But I am reminded that we are not in a situation like that where we are constantly having to beat people up to help us survive. We're also running a much lower we have a much smaller operation than KXP does, though, so who knows, maybe someday. I don't know where I'm going with this, but I want to say thank you to everyone. I guess what I'm saying is it's a good reminder that it's having independent media is super important, and I feel really gratified and satisfied being part of it, and can't thank you all enough for making this possible. Anyway, let's get out of here. I'm Jeremiah Shan signing off for Aaron Campo and Lickett. This is No Sadietes, part of the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network. Remember, you'll never get alone.
let's go f***ing Sounders.